How's that?
Thanks, Aaron. Okay. Good morning. Welcome. My name is Tony DeFranco. I'm the Director of Operations for SUNY OER Services. Welcome to today's Open Education Week seminar. We're pleased to welcome Allison Brown, who is the Digital Publishing Services Manager at SUNY Geneseo and oversees the library's publishing program, which includes supporting student journals as well as managing the editorial and production processes of the Geneseo authors and Milne Open Textbook imprints. Dr. Kaylin Green is the Assistant Professor of Addiction Studies at Empire State University. She earned her PhD in Criminal Justice with a specialization in Addiction Studies from Walden University. She worked as a clinician and case manager for, the recently incarcerated struggling with substance use issues. She's a master's New York State credentialed alcoholism and substance abuse counselor. She has presented her research in OER textbooks at national conferences such as NCORE and AAC&U. And Andre Mount holds a PhD in music theory from the University of California at Santa Barbara and is currently an associate professor of music theory at the Crane School of Music at SUNY Potsdam. In addition to presenting his research at regional and national conferences, his articles have been published in the Journal of Musicology and the Journal of the Society for American Music, among others. He's the author of Fundamentals, Function, and Form, an OER music theory textbook, and maintains an OER musicianship training website called The Trained Ear. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Allison, Kaylin, and Andre.
Thank you so much. We're really happy to be here. Thank you all for coming. Again, I'm going to talk today about the publication process with Milne Open Textbooks. If you've never heard of us, we are a publishing program out of SUNY Geneseo, but we work with all SUNY authors. And then Andre and Kaylin are two of our authors. So that's why I asked them to join us today to give the author perspective. All right, so just a very brief history of Milne Open Textbooks. So we started as an IITG grant in 2012. So we were originally called Open SUNY Textbooks. And then after the run of the grant, we switched over to being a SUNY Geneseo supported program. So then we renamed ourselves Milne Open Textbooks in 2020 to reflect that. But we still maintain the catalog of the original Open SUNY textbooks, and then just everything that we publish moving forward has the imprint of Milne Open Textbooks. So today I'm going to go over like the services that we offer and what the publication process looks like with Milne Open Textbooks. And Andre and Kaylin are going to chime in and give their perspectives and their experiences along the way. So like I mentioned, we work with any SUNY faculty member for our authors, and that can be one SUNY faculty member with a group of non-SUNY people as well. And then we are also looking for kind of full text, full course materials that would support a full semester course. And along with that, original work. So in other words, not like remixed work from other OER. And then lastly, we are an open textbook publisher. So we want our authors to publish openly and select an open license from the Creative Commons open licenses. So those are kind of the eligibility we look at initially. So if we are working with you, then we are supporting you during your authoring process, all of the editorial steps that we'll go through. We provide access to a publication platform, so in particular Pressbooks. We also provide services around that to do all of the production in the platform, but we also provide access if you would rather do that yourself or work in collaboration. And then we offer distribution of your text, both in print and online. And then lastly, we would be considered Diamond Open Access because we are not asking for like processing fees from authors. And also we provide our work for free for the readers. So we operate completely out of the library budget at the moment. And so we kind of are a shoestring budget operation. So we provide as much service as we can. The main limits are, big ticket items like hiring a outside freelancer for copy editing. But that doesn't mean we don't copy edit our pieces, don't worry. And I'll mention along the way different areas where, we do have we aren't able to provide monetary support, like for stipends for main authors or peer reviewers, but we do want to be a close partner and collaborator if those funds are needed. So we work with you in terms of locating possible funding and providing letters of support, anything that we can do in terms of making the process work for you. All right. So I thought we would start today with thinking about why a faculty member might want to publish an open textbook. What we have here are a few reasons that I have observed in our authors and lots of combinations of these, but I think we should really hear from Kaylin and Andre about their perspectives.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Allison. This is wonderful. So why I wanted to publish with open access. The root of our textbook is social justice. So as we were developing the content for the class, we were looking for textbooks, and we were finding the textbooks we were finding were A, very costly, B, didn't really cover everything we wanted them to cover. So we started to deciding, well, why don't we create our own resource? And at this point, the textbook wasn't quite on our mind yet. It was just us finding resources to put together to create low-cost resources for our students. Because if we're teaching about social justice and equity and inclusion, why not practice what we preach? So we started doing some research on OERs in general. And we found out that 1 in 5 college students reported having skipped or deferred a class due to the high price of the required learning resources. And we saw that when we were looking for textbooks to include in our class, that these textbooks were simply expensive. We found that 7 in 10 college students reported that they have not purchased at least one textbook because of that textbook being too expensive. This means that the students are not acquiring the proper materials that they need to learn the most they can out of that class. That's setting them up for essentially failure instead of success. And we want to make sure that our students who take this class are being set up for success. We found research shows us that the cost of textbooks is rising at a rate 4 times that of inflation. So these textbooks are becoming more and more expensive faster than students can make money to come in to pay for them. And that we love the idea that OERs can be customizable. So while we have a black and white print of content, an instructor could take an OER, adjust it to make it be really what they want to be, take pieces of it. So we loved all these pieces of what open access meant. And we thought this really fit beautifully in with our project of the social justice class and then the OER that we were hoping to create alongside of it. So it kind of turned into a, let's get some free materials together. And then we got kind of connected to Allison just for like support. And it turned into a, hey, you guys want to write a whole textbook? And it was, sure, why not? So it's become a really fun process, but we did our research and background to decide why we wanted to go this route. And everything really pointed to this route being the best route for what our vision was for our project in general.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for inviting me to be a part of this. This is such a great thing to be talking about. My motivations for publishing open access are, there's some overlap with Kaylin, but there's some differences as well. My book grew out of a project that I'd worked on in grad school at the UC Santa Barbara Music Department. And 2 of the faculty there had been tasked with creating a remedial music theory program to help transfer students kind of move through the degree faster. And their plan was to build a series of online modules that could be assigned based on a diagnostic exam. And they hired me to write these lessons and all of the assessments that went along with them. And so we, over several years, amassed a ton of material, I think close to 400 single-spaced pages of music theory lessons covering everything from first year nuts and bolts stuff straight through the whole common music theory core sequence. Unfortunately, the project kind of fizzled in 2010. They lost funding after a couple of hiring some dud web developers and realizing that the whole project was a little bit more complicated than they had envisioned. And so nothing really came of it. And I took all of that text and I put it up on my own personal website, mostly to show search committees as I was applying for jobs. But it just sort of sat there collecting virtual dust. I registered the page with some search engines, and I noticed that the texts were kind of slowly rising in the ranks for music theory search results. Theory-hungry Googlers were finding the page and reading through the lessons, and people would occasionally get in touch with questions or comments on it. And so I decided that this could be really helpful for some folks, and that I should rework this into something that's more like a traditional textbook. And I also didn't want to self-host it because I thought that would appear amateurish. So I filled out the author's admission form on the Open SUNY site and was on my way. This was also at a period in my field in music theory where a lot of folks were starting to acknowledge a long-standing imbalance in representation. A lot of music theorists were starting to push back against the tradition of focusing on just the work of dead white male composers. And so as I was making revisions, I saw this as an opportunity to kind of contribute to that movement and swap out some of the original musical examples with excerpts by women and composers from other underrepresented groups, which at the time, not a lot of textbooks were doing. And then in my teaching, I had also gotten very frustrated with all of the pointless and expensive new editions that my students were forced to buy. Music theory doesn't change very quickly. So whenever a publisher comes out with a new edition of a textbook, there's not a lot of substantive new material. And it makes old books obsolete. Students can't buy used books. And of course, I have to go through the process of updating my syllabus with page number changes and everything. And so with an OER book, none of that's the case. If a instructor finds an edition that they like, they can stick with it. And then, like Kaylin was saying, the cost for students is also a big concern. I work in a pretty large department, and we struck a deal with Norton a couple of years ago to bundle a set of books that our students were buying. But even then, the students are still spending hundreds of dollars on their course materials. And given that the content of these books hasn't really changed very much in the last 40 or 50 years, it just seemed more and more unconscionable to be asking students to be spending that much money. So yeah, so overall, very motivated to publish my books as open access.
Thank you both so much. All right. So, so my plan here on out is to talk through the timeline of what publication might look like. This is a little overview of the steps that we go through. So it does, it might seem like a lot, and it is a lot, but that's what we're here for, to try to kind of demystify the process for you and take on as much of the workload as we can. And then also, even though it's this linear list here, it is a very non-linear process, often lots of overlapping stages and things like that. You can see from this little graphic that production kind of happens or can happen throughout the whole time, depending on how many different pieces you have in your book. But yeah, so those are the main steps that we'll go through today. All right. All right, so the first step in our process would be to submit a proposal. So on our website, we have a for authors or publishing with us page. So you do have the option of contacting us and sitting down for a consultation. So I think that's, the recommended workflow on our site that goes over the process. So there's a form you can fill out to schedule time with me, basically. And then I often would be going through a lot of the stuff we're talking about today to give you an idea about what what the publication process looks like, what services we offer, any particulars about your project that would help me give you a better idea about what that process might look like. And then also to talk you through our proposal process so that you have a good idea of kind of like what to focus on and things like that. And then we do have a proposal form that is fairly detailed. This is a new form. We've had one in the past that was really based on like internal stuff that wasn't super helpful. But I recently, in the last couple of years, established a new editorial team. So in the past, our projects were reviewed by, like, in the late past, it was like library leadership, and then a OER general group that also did a lot of other things at Geneseo. And I really wanted a dedicated group to oversee the acquisitions, and in that to make sure that I had more faculty representation. So now we have an editorial team that's made up of, I think it's right now it's 3 faculty members here at Geneseo, a librarian, and myself. And then we have this this form that goes over, the information we need. So the general things that we're asking about is content. So what is your book about? What are the unique features? What niche is this, addressing. And then the second general area is kind of adoptability, looking at what courses this useful for. Is this useful beyond your institution? We're not going for super high numbers. We're not grant funded or motivated by like what the dollar amount of savings is. But we do want to know that the effort that we're putting into publishing the book is that it's going to be useful for more than one institution. And then lastly, we're looking at logistics in terms of, how big of a project is this? How complex? Is this something we can fit into our current workload, et cetera. So those are the general areas of the proposal form. And then I recently just released a rubric that goes along with the proposal form to help authors understand better kind of what we're looking for all of those areas. So it's just, I know that the publishing process can be so opaque with a lot of other publishers, and I really want ours to be much more transparent and friendly for people to approach, even if they've never published before. So so that's on that first link that Erin shared, the Publishing with Us. You can find both the form and the rubric as well. All right. So and Andre had said, and sometimes we get authors that come to us already with a manuscript already written. But if you start the project with us in the writing stage or before the writing stage, then at that point we would be able to provide project management, and that can be flexible based on what you need. It can be very hands-off and let you do your work, or it can be providing meetings or check-ins or deadlines to help you. And then we also try to provide some support and education around how to take your content and make it a really useful and effective educational tool. So looking at what the structure is going to be, looking at what kind of pedagogical elements are going to be helpful for your subject. So, and by that I mean, having learning outcomes and learning objectives written in, kind of discussion questions, examples or case studies, anything that can bolster up your content and really, keep the students and faculty focused and using the material well. And then lastly, we help with locating media that's openly licensed, helping you navigate any processes in terms of asking for permission if something is not openly licensed, et cetera. Yeah. So her project is in process. And so Kaylin, did you want to say anything about the writing or revision process?
Yes, please. I first kind of want to start with the whole proposal process, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I found the proposal process was so interesting because my lead co-author, Dr. Bernadette de Jong, she and I started this process in December of 2022, and we weren't given the wonderful information that Allison existed until about February 2023. So we had started the project beforehand, but we weren't super in depth in it yet. So when we met with Allison, reviewed everything, she gave us the proposal application. We filled it out from what little information we had at that time. And essentially the team kicked it back and saying, hey, this isn't enough. Like, you don't have enough here to really give us some teeth onto wanting to support the project. So my partner and I, we had to sit down and kind of really dive deep into what we wanted this book to look like. And it completely made sense after the fact of us diving out and figuring out the chapters and the content and some practice examples. And then we submitted that, and Alice and the team were like, yes, we totally want to support this. But it completely makes sense that they expect a level of depth. They're not here to help you brainstorm your textbook out. They're here for the publication piece. So you have to be prepared to bring to the table your solidly flushed out, strong proposal for them to review and say, hey, yeah, we want to support this. And it was a fun process to go through, but I wanted to kind of pop that out there first, to make sure that people have solid ideas to bring to the table first. But so where we are in the writing process, we have a 16 chapter textbook. We have the very last chapter. We have the whole chapter. We're reviewing it for the last time before sending it over to Allison, which was a new update, actually, Allison, as of this morning. So very, very good stuff. It's work. It's work, but it's fun work. And as she was saying, it looks like a linear process. First you outline it, then you write it, then you peer review it. But it's a lot of back and forth between the chapters, because depending on who's writing which chapter or who you have supporting you, we have decided to create this textbook with, I can't even count off the top of my head how many co-authors we have. We have two main authors, me and Dr. DeYoung, and then each of us have brought in multiple other co-authors for specific chapters, depending on the level of expertise in the content. So with that comes different people's work ethics and different people's time availability. So we're often bouncing between a chapter and peer reviewing and writing and revising. And one of the biggest things that we have to Allison and the team is, I've never worked in the corporate world per se, but I see a lot of videos on, the nuances of working in corporate world, and you have a project manager. And we always call Allison our personal project manager, because she really keeps everything organized and solid and us moving in the right direction on the right chapter. And without having that team member to help support that process, I could so easily see how someone would get completely lost. Just lost in where I am and what chapter I should be focusing on and how to move forward and the best ways to move forward. So the writing process, it's interesting, but it's a lot of back and forth. And when you have the solid team that's helping you keep that track moving forward, it puts everything into a more linear approach where it all seems to make sense a little bit more. And right now so most of the book is written and we're in their peer revision stage. Do you want me to go into the peer revision piece of it, or is that for later, Allison?
It is the next slide, so feel free to mention it and I can just follow up with anything you didn't cover.
Deal. Okay. All right. So we were asked to find 2 peer reviewers from outside university or colleges. And the point of that was to get different perspectives, right? So both me and my main co-author work at the same university, SUNY Empire State University. And some of our co-authors work with us, some don't. With the peer reviewer, at least one of them is supposed to be from a different university or facility to give a different perspective, outside perspective on your holistic approach there. So we identified 2. Both peer reviewers were super excited about it. We sent the information off to them, gave them our timeline. We always have a little bit of wiggle room with our timeline because life happens, and I appreciate that. We got one of our peer reviewers has been on it and getting us the chapters back, and it's been great. And one has completely fallen off the face of the planet. We have no idea why, but it ended up us having to find additional peer reviewers to do what we needed to do. And every meeting we had with Allison, Dr. DeYoung and I were, frantic and stressed out of what are we going to do? We haven't heard from this peer reviewer. And Allison goes, it's okay, just find another one. And we were like, oh, we can do that. Awesome. So again, having that kind of mini project manager, keeping us, organized, keeping us sane in the process is helpful and will continue to be extremely helpful throughout the process.
Yeah, my main point about peer review here is that it's like the most unpredictable stage because you're bringing in more people into the project. And like Caitlin said, life happens. So I have these kind of ideal timelines of how long this would take. But that's if you have like a not huge book. Oh my gosh, my lights just turned off in the room I'm presenting in. Okay. But yeah, so it can just be very long if, you know, if things don't work out the way that you plan. So from my years of experience, I've learned that you want to invite more peer reviews than you need. So we do, I think, like we minimally want one review. We really ideally want 2 to 3. So if that means engaging with 4 people so that we hopefully get back 2 reviews, then, you know, that's what we do. And then, but we can also get creative. We've worked with one of my texts, we, you know, did a separate reviewer for every chapter. In that case, it was that every chapter had a different focus, and so having subject matter experts in those particular areas was helpful. For Andre's book, we split it up a little bit in terms of like function. And yeah, I don't know if there's a better way to explain it, Andre, but like having someone just look at the activities, having someone just look at the answer keys. So there are ways that we can be creative about it. And then just to backtrack one more time, so we do kind of open/attributed reviews. So that means that the author and the peer reviewer are known to each other. We don't always, we don't usually publish the results of the review unless the reviewer is willing to write up us, you know, something, you know, that is meant to be published with the book. So it's the open process is mainly that the reviewers know each other. We usually acknowledge the reviewer in the textbook so that they get credit for their work. And then, and that's to make sure that, you know, that can be a collaborative relationship. So we've, you know, we've seen some cool collaborations come out of peer review. That's also, it can also lead to adoptions. Your peer reviewer can become a great advocate for you. My example here is our real analysis book, where we had a faculty member here at Geneseo work with someone, I believe she was from Oswego. I wish I remembered. But they ended up having a great working relationship together. She gave kind of real-time feedback. She tested it with her students. She helped them convert the book into a different format that was more usable for the students. So that's the kind of thing we want. It's like we want peer review to function in terms of, for us as a publisher, where we want to know that the information is reliable and effective, but we want it to be a really positive experience for the author and get useful feedback that they can incorporate and really, you know, want them to engage with that professor and like with the material to make it better for the students. Andre, did you have anything else you wanted to add about peer review?
Not a whole lot. Mostly just to echo things that the two of you were saying. The whole peer review process, I think, was the most astounding part of the process for me. Just the generosity of the people that volunteered to look at the book. And like Allison was saying, we had sort of assigned people specific tasks. Some people looked at the musical examples and proofread the notation and checked the audio files for the musical examples. Other people, we have interactive exercises in the book, and they were tasked with checking to make sure that those were accurate and clear. But what we found in the end was that almost everybody couldn't help themselves but to look at everything and just really wanted to contribute to the whole project. And so it became almost over time, in retrospect, it became less about peer review and more of a kind of unexpected collaboration. And so just, yeah, the generosity of these volunteers was, I'm still floored by how much time and effort people put into a stranger's book like that.
It is very exciting to bring the community in. So Andre and Kaylin's books also provide 2 examples. So for Kaylin and Bernie's book, we did like we had a list of people that we engaged for peer reviews or sent invitations for peer reviewing. For Andres, we did an open call. So we just, wrote up like a little ad saying like, we're looking for reviewers, we're looking for this, and we circulated it and people got in touch. So there's multiple ways to go about finding people. And I think that's, we had such a big response, was that we were like, we want to find a job for everyone.
Yeah, we kind of looked all over the place. You had sent some messages out. I posted on music theory listservs. I posted on the music theory subreddit, and we got a great reviewer from Reddit, actually.
That's awesome. I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah.
We had so many music librarians too that were very excited about being involved. Yeah, we had the Intro to LGBTQ Studies book also got a ton of librarian volunteers that just like snowballed into a whole new like section of the book, like a new chapter and like new research resources that the librarians did. So it can be so interesting to open up your project like that to new collaborators. And that rolls us into copy editing. So I mentioned earlier, as a publisher, we can't hire a freelancer for every single book. Unfortunately, that can run in the thousands of dollars. If it's something that if you feel like very strongly about it and want to locate grant funding, we would be an absolute partner in that. But otherwise, what we can offer are engaging with these volunteers, so putting out a call, or looking at some student options. So sometimes, we're able to look at like an internship position for an upper level student. Sometimes it's a subject specific thing that it would be good to have a student that has had some experience in, so that can work. And then for our volunteers, I have a list of people that have signed up to be volunteers. A lot of these are again librarians or other academics that are willing to donate their time in that way. And often we will, sometimes we'll engage multiple people and have people like split up the work. And that, that is organization stuff that we handle. So we would get in touch with everyone and have everyone do the editing and then pass that back off to you. So then the author's role in this part is really telling us what style guide to use or working with us to figure out what a good style guide would be, and then reviewing all of the edits. We would usually use a system like either Google Docs or Microsoft Word and track changes, so that you can review all of those revisions and reply to any of the editor's comments. Okay, so once copy editing has finished, then we get to move into production. So this is always an exciting part for me, and I think for the authors too, because you get to see like the fruits of your labor and what it's really going to look like. So the platform that we use, like I mentioned earlier, is called Pressbooks. So this is a open source plugin on top of WordPress, which is also open source. We work directly with the company Pressbooks. And what is really great about it is that it lets us have a single source for our book that's easy to update. So there's an online home for your book that has the capabilities of any web page. So you can stream video, audio, interactives. There's a lot you can do in terms of what can be embedded in the book. In particular, H5P activities, if you're familiar at all, you're able to create those and embed them. And then the other thing about Pressbooks is that, well, it's easy to update because it's an online like blog base. And then it also meets a lot of accessibility standards. It has a lot of that built in. And then in terms of the service that we provide with taking your manuscript and loading it into Pressbooks, doing all the formatting, we build accessibility into that. So making sure there's alt text, making sure there's correct hierarchy. And so that's something that we try to do for all of our texts. The other great thing about Pressbooks is that it's very heavily used in the OER world, so that other places can take make a clone copy of it, basically. So they can take a copy that that they can edit, but that doesn't affect the original copy. And then it also has all of the original metadata assigned to it so that it always credits the original author. So that's really cool to be able to offer an easy way that your users can kind of like riff off your work. And then within that, we have some options in terms of doing some design for the actual book. Pressbooks has themes where you can choose some fonts and things like that, has built-in options for embedding your pedagogical elements, like your discussion questions and things like that. And then lastly, we are able to help out with cover design. That's one of my favorite things to do is help authors design the cover or do the designing in collaboration. And then the other part of production is going to be delving into any interactives or ancillaries. So I really see the interactives and any media really as a great opportunity for student engagement. When we were doing the production for, again, the Intro to LGBTQ Studies book, one of my student assistants did a lot of the searching for media, like openly licensed media to put in the book, and the authors were just so excited to have a student, like the student perspective, helping choose the media for that. And then, I mean, it can even, it can go deeper than that in terms of like kind of employing some open pedagogy in terms of like testing your book in your classroom and having your students create content that might get folded into your textbook. For anything that's interactive in the book, so a video or anything like that, Pressbooks is able to, when we export the PDF, it inserts like a little placeholder that says, there's something interactive here. You need to go to the online book, and it has a URL or a link, depending on whether it's a, for print or for online. So I know a lot of people are interested in like, well, if it's an online book, then, like how is it in print? So that's generally how it works, so that people know if they have it in print, then they know to go and look at the online version to get the full experience. And then lastly, if your textbook does have instructor resources, which we really, really encourage because we see much higher adoption for resources that have instructor resources. If they do happen to have any like answer keys or anything like that, then we are able to secure those and verify any faculty that want access to them. So Andre's book, Fundamentals for Function and Form, is one example of those, the workbook on our website, and then the interpersonal communications is another example. So if you go to those web pages, you would see that there's a little like a little lock that says like, hey, you need a password to access this material, and directs them to contact us, and then we verify them before providing the password. And so, okay, so now I'll have Andre talk about his textbook because he utilized a lot of the interactive capabilities of Pressbooks.
Yeah, so I can show some examples of the kinds of things that Allison was talking about. In music theory textbooks, audio examples obviously are a necessity. If students aren't listening to the sounds that they're reading about, the whole endeavor is meaningless. And traditionally, publishers have included CDs, or if you go back enough, tapes or access codes for websites so that music theory students can hear the music that they're reading about. But as anybody who has taught a music theory class knows, the vast majority of students aren't going to go to a CD player or a website while they're reading a book. They just want to read it and get it over with. So we have embedded audio, and you can see an example here where there's an audio player right above some staff notation, and students can listen to it right there as they're reading the book. Couldn't be any easier. And then Allison, if we go to the next slide, the digital version of the textbook also has these interactive exercises. You can see this working in the little animation on the left there. So students can pause and check their knowledge at keys in the text with these short exercises. You can click the header to expand the exercise and reveal hints and answers. And then, like Allison was saying, we have placeholders for these in the text. So it will refer either to the website, or for all of the exercises, we put those in appendices at the end of the book. And then if we could go to the next slide too. Oh, we lost it, but I can talk about it. After we published the textbook, it became apparent that having a workbook would make this a much more attractive alternative to books from traditional publishers. A lot of music theory classes are getting bigger and instructors don't have the time to make their own homework assignments. So I recruited several colleagues from SUNY Potsdam to put together a series of exercises to supplement the textbook. And the resultant workbook, which you can see here, has the same chapter and section structure as the textbook. But then, like Allison was explaining, we wanted to have an answer key for this, but obviously we didn't want to make that available to everyone. So we put it in a password protected PDF, and instructors can verify their institutional affiliation with Allison, who will send them a password. And the only other thing I was going to say, it's a big book, and we were a little concerned that it might be overly bulky for some purposes. It's, I think, 700 pages in the print version. And so we broke it up into 4 sections. So these sections correspond with the 4 sections of the book, but they also correspond with the 4 semesters of a typical music theory sequence. And so if an instructor wants to just assign the first part of the book, they can have their students download and maybe print just one part of it. So yeah, that's a taste of some of the supplementary features that we had in my book.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm sorry for the slide
That was all good.
hiccup there. All right. So the last part of production is then the PDF typesetting. So that's once we have that core online Pressbooks version, then we can export it to multiple file types, but the main one is PDF. And that's something that we generally handle through our office. And so the author portion is really being ready to proofread. So we, provide the PDF and then the links to the online versions for you to look over really carefully. And then the last thing would be looking at the or setting up the print version. So at that point, we would be ready to get ready for publication. So for publication, we compile all your metadata. We utilize that to register an ISBN. So that lets us give your book a unique number. That makes it easier both to distribute in print, but also online. And then we also catalog the book so that it's available in SUNY libraries. It is also available in general to other libraries, but we don't catalog it for them. We provide the metadata, I think through WorldCat, so that then other libraries can take that. And then we do use the metadata for the printing setup as well. So then that last step is really just getting those finalized files, putting them on our main Milne Open Textbooks website. And then we also submit to major like OER directories and repositories to make sure those other places are where people are looking for OER, your book shows up. And one of the main ones that we make sure that your book is in the Open Textbook Library out of Minnesota, which is a really great resource because it also provides some post-publication reviews. So in terms of marketing, we do, we do all that distribution to the different repositories and directories. We also send out email announcements. We can provide media for you for sharing on social media and things like that. And we can handle a lot of the OER and librarian outreach, but then we do our best to provide you with content then to reach out to more your discipline. And then really encouraging, other ways to present, like presentations like this. And Kaylin, I don't know if you wanted to say anything, but you've been really proactive about getting out there about your book.
Thank you. Yeah. So I do have to give a shout out to Shannon Pritting, who's also on this call, because he has been a huge part of this process for Bernie and I, and with Allison. And so what we've been doing is we have been submitting proposals to conferences in a very wide variety of settings. We're finding our book and our research and our work it's comparable and fitting into many different types of conference proposals. So we're submitting proposals, we're going to conferences, we're talking about our book, we're educating people not only on OERs, on our social justice curriculum, how our OER is being developed to support the curriculum in general, how we're including activities like Andre was talking about, to make the book enticing and interesting for instructors to use, right? It's one of the reasons why instructors don't use OERs as often, is because they don't have questions or discussion answers the way paid textbooks do. So we decided to incorporate a lot of those things into our book to hopefully bolster professors and instructors to want to use this open education resource. So when we go to conferences, we're educating people about the book, about the process, about the great resources it's going to involve. And then we also ask people to give us their information if they want access to this as soon as it's published. So every presentation we go to, every coffee house we sit at, every lunch we go to at a conference, I've got a piece of paper and I say, hey, if you want me to email you a free copy of this beautiful OER textbook that's double peer reviewed, that has, embedded discussion questions for essay and homework assignments, give me your email address. And people are giving me their email addresses like crazy, which is great. So I've got this giant Excel spreadsheet with all these email addresses for people all over the country who are ready to accept this book as soon as I email it to them. So Bernie and I are kind of calling it our little mini book tour, because we're just going around talking about this book, and we're having a lot of fun doing it. But I also see that as a really important part of the OER writing process, because we don't have fund, we have funding for certain things because of the wonderful SUNY OER grant, but there's no funding as other publishers would do to pay and put your poster cover on in a magazine or something, for publication and for advertising purposes. So we decided to take this on ourselves. We can have the best OER, the best textbook that includes everything anyone would ever want, but if no one knows about it, it does nobody any good, right? So people have to know that this thing exists. So Bernie and I have put a lot of work into how do we let the public know that this book is existing, what it's comprised of, the benefits to it. So right now we're doing a lot of work on that to get the word out there about it, so that people have the option or know it exists to hopefully choose to use it.
Awesome. Thank you. And unfortunately, the work does not end with publication. So there's some post-publication, continuing the marketing, as Kaylin was talking about, making sure people know about your work. And then on our end, and then in collaboration with you, we're also looking at maintenance and then looking at adoption. So one thing about maintenance, and one great thing about OER, is that if we find errors, we can change them, we can correct them. So we're able to work with you to do that. One thing that we make sure that we do is keep a change log, so that there's a record of the corrections or the updates that have been made, and that does allow us to do some version control. We also try to collect adoptee information. So we have a survey that pops up whenever someone visits the website that asks if they're using the book. So we're able to learn from both students and faculty about where they're using the book, why they're using the book, if they're a faculty member that has adopted the book, how many sections. So if you are doing things where you are looking for numbers and estimating savings, we're able to find a little bit of that. Of course, it is opt-in. So it's, I'm sure, not a full picture. But then to complement that, we're able to get some statistics around the number of views of your online book through Pressbooks, the number of downloads for your book and each part of your book, and then looking at referrers for, I think, both the downloads and the views. So if someone hasn't reported an adoption, then often we can look at the referrals and be like, hey, someone from Stony Brook, we're getting a lot of traffic like every semester from Stony Brook, so we can, guess that someone at Stony Brook is assigning this textbook. So those are all things we can do to kind of help you tell the story of your book and its impact. And then, hopefully, make sure it has a good long life. And, and then if you're interested in updating it into a second edition, we have a new form for you to fill out to propose a second edition. And then these screenshots here, there's a little example of a change log. And then the bottom one is an example of what a cloned book might look like. So if someone clones your book through Pressbooks and does a derivative of it, then it would retain the information of where it came from. And then we have Andre's example.
Yeah, so I see that we're running out of time, so I won't talk about it too long, but this is just a list of minor changes that I've been maintaining for the textbook. A lot of these come from, I was speaking earlier about the generosity of strangers on the internet, and a lot of these just come from people out of the blue contacting me. I think now that the book is in all of these various OER indices, it's a lot more visible. And so I hear from people just out of the blue. And I've been, by the way, pleasantly surprised by the amount of international attention that the book has gotten. I've had people contact me from Australia and Ireland and Indonesia and France, and they often have very helpful things to say about the book. And I guess the only other thing I would add is that as part of a related process, when I use this book in my own classes, I was initially worried that if students came across the occasional but inevitable typo, that they might not take the book very seriously. And so my strategy for mitigating that was to enlist them, to offer some small but not insignificant extra credit for identifying mistakes. And then I framed the whole thing by pointing out the value of OER and explaining the ongoing process of refining the book, and told my students that they should take pride in their contributions and being an OER pioneer in music theory. And many of them took it to heart and found dozens of issues with it. And the book is so much better for it. So it's the process, like Allison was saying, is ongoing and continues to be very rewarding.
Oh, that's so great. I love stories about how the book has been used in the classroom. And I know at least one other author that has done a similar like extra credit for, finding things like that. I think in that case it was a math book, and similarly, he's had a really good experience with it as well. And there are so many more creative things to explore with OER projects like this. Like, I think we've looked at doing beta testing, so like taking a draft of the book and running it in a course and doing some more formal assessment about how the book is functioning. So those are all things that we would be able to explore, like depending on the project, depending on what your interest is. We hope to be a very flexible and creative partner to you. So those would all be things that we would be open to hearing about. So we have a few minutes left. If anyone has any follow-up questions for any of us, then we would love to talk more about what you're interested in. But otherwise, thank you so much for being here.
Feel free to unmute yourself or use the chat for any questions that you might have. Sounds like it was super informative.
Thank you, Edward. I'm so
Yeah,
glad.
I'll unmute myself and make myself visible just to say thank you to all of you. This was very helpful, and it sounds like you have great projects, and it's very impressive, and you know, very helpful. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, I guess if there are no other questions, I will wrap us up. And again, if you do have questions, feel free to jump in. Aaron, I assume you're going to share some of the links, and if not, I can do that in the chat. We want to thank you for attending today's webinar. Thanks to our speakers, rather, for sharing today. Excellent presentation. The full schedule of events happening this week, along with a link to register and view the recordings, can be found at the link in the chat. And please complete the feedback survey to help us plan for future offerings. That link will also be shared. Thanks, Aaron. And we hope to see you at another Open Ed session this week. And thanks again. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.